Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. This time around I am playing as the Dwarves against Bretonnia, led by Revi, on the map MB Crossroads. So let's break things down. So right off the bat, I'm sure you guys saw in the startup, I've decided to try out a bit of a different build here with the Dwarves, going a bit shorter range, but not a full-on melee build. So I wanted to give a shot to the Iron Drakes, especially the Iron Drakes with the Trollhammer Torpedoes. They haven't gotten buffed or changed at all, but they are generally a somewhat lackluster pick. Most people don't run them, but they're definitely a very cool unit. I definitely wanted to give them a shot. I also wanted to try out the Iron Drakes with flamethrowers because I did see that my opponent was bringing Bretonnia, and I figured they could be decent against all that squishy infantry. So for my lineup, I did decide to bring a Dwarf Lord, but pretty standard, cheap pick. He doesn't have much in the way of skills. We'll come in with, of course, Potion of Full Audience, Potion of Toughness, Firing of Authority, which is very solid against the general kind of Bretonian infantry, and Stand Your Ground, of course, to buff up the units from him. Alongside him, we do have a Runesmith. He is coming in with all three of his runes. Including the Rune of Negation, Rune of Wrath and Ruin, Rune of Oath and Steel, but also the Master Rune of Stromny Redbeard, which will improve the melee attack and leadership of all the nearby units. Especially the melee attack is a decent boost, since that will make sure that the Dwarf Warriors and the Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons and my Miners will perform much better, especially when they're fighting up against something like Foot Squires. My front line is composed of 4 units of Dwarf Warriors. These guys are all ranked up to Veteran C1 because I had a little bit of money left over. These guys are just a very solid frontline unit. Bretonnia doesn't have a lot in the way of fear-inducing units. The only terror bombs they can really drop are if they bring a Lord and a Hippogriff, or a Green Knight. So I wasn't too worried about fear or terror. Fan Chanters was got fear, but it's very limited selection. So between Hippogriffs and Fan Chanters and Lords, and so about these guys, they should perform decently well against the low armor Bretonnian kind of chaff infantry, and they'll even hold their ground fairly well against Foot Squires because they do have fairly high melee defense. Foot Squires are pretty low melee attack stats. Behind that, there are 3 units of Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons, spread out so that they can kind of flex and cover wherever they're needed. These guys are really just there to counter enemy Foot Squires, as well as enemy cavalry if it does charge through, because they do have armor piercing, so they will perform okay even against cavalry, though of course their melee attack stats are not the greatest, but with the Runesmith around, they should do fairly well. And then behind that, 2 units of Miners. I got this idea from Turin. If you guys watch him, he does a lot of YouTube videos of quick match gameplay for Total War. In the odd chance that you guys don't watch me and don't watch him, I'll be sure to leave a link down to his channel in the description. And he greatly recommends Miners. It's kind of a cheap chaff unit to protect your flanks, and so I wanted to give him a shot. They do have armor piercing, so they should be okay against Bretonnian cavalry, and they should also provide me with a bit of a flex unit to help shut down those Foot Squires in a very desperate situation. My back line is 1 unit of Dragonback Slayers, and these guys are, of course, pretty quick. They do slow enemy units and actually make them vulnerable to fire, so in the odd chance that I get the opportunity to do so, they'll be a nice combo with the Iron Drakes. And these guys, of course, are just a very, very powerful unit. They do have a charge defense large, just almost a must-pick anti-large choice. Then for my range contingent, it is a bit of a mixed bag. And the centerpiece is this unit of cannons. Of course, these guys did get buffed recently. They now have much higher accuracy and an anti-large bonus, and they can really pick apart enemy lords. They can pick apart enemy Grail relics, is what I was hoping for. Shut down enemy cavalry, that sort of stuff at long range. Alongside them, 1 unit of Thunders. These guys are kind of there just to give me a flexible, longer ranged fire support option, because my other ranged options are pretty short ranged. I do have a unit of Iron Drakes over here on the right flank. These guys are fairly expensive, but their damage is very high. They can quickly rout units, especially the lightly armored, squishy infantry, but they can even do fairly well against units that are reasonably armored, like Foot Squires. Foot Squires don't have the greatest armor. They only have 70, so against Iron Drakes, they won't actually perform that well. They won't be that resistant. Behind that, 2 units of Iron Drakes with Trollhammer Torpedoes, and these guys just do massive amounts of burst damage. Each of them, they can basically one-shot most cavalry in a single hit, and they should definitely be able to level Lords, so I'm definitely hoping to get some good use out of them here. Go throwing things into the slow-mo bit here while going over my opponent's army. He's running 3 units of Peasants for his front line, just kind of chaff units to absorb fire. Behind that, 4 units of men-at-arms with shields. Once again, these are a bit of a chaff unit. They should absorb fire from the frontal arc. They do have silver shields, so they should be solid there. Alongside 2 Grail Relics, which I think is a bit of overkill. I think 1 Grail Relic is solid, but dwarves who don't really cause fear or terror, it's not really necessary to bring more than 1. And then behind that, 5 units of foot squires, and these guys of course have armor piercing and just very solid damage. And here in the center, the Damsel of Life, who does come in with Earthblood as well as Dwellers Below. And interestingly enough, my opponent did leave the ability on her that provides magic resistance, Hour of the Lady, which I think is a bit of a waste once again against dwarves. Now for his lord and his main kind of goon squad here, my opponent did bring King Lewin, and Lewin is coming in with most of everything, Sword of Corone, Lion's Shield I do believe it's called, and all of his regeneration, the Ladies Champion, and then 2 paladins mounted on Pegasus. So just a very strong air contingent. So without further ado, let's kind of kick things into high gear. Unfortunately, I did have my cannon on auto fire, so the first volley it fired off went into the peasant mob, which is definitely a bit of a waste. I did miss that in the beginning here. Second volley though is targeted. I am aiming for the Grail Relic, but unfortunately it is kind of hidden amongst these men-at-arms. And the cannon is just not really capable of hitting it. It misses, does some damage to these men-at-arms, kills a few of them, but it's really not something all that crazy. The lines are slowly but surely closing though. And I do get 1 more volley off. Now I'm pushing my lords forward. I'm starting to push my front line forward a little bit. Only selectively pushing some of my infantry forward. I don't want to pull my everything forward. A second volley does go in, and I realize at this point that I'm really just not hitting the Grail Relic. It's too well shielded by the mix of the peasants and men-at-arms. So I'm going to shift fire onto the Damsel of Life, who is on a horse, and so she should be a bit of an easier target. I'm pushing my flamethrowers forward, pushing my thunderers forward, and now my Trollhammers, and finally the great weapons are also starting to push up, as are the miners. The Dragonback Slayers, I don't want to push them past the artillery because I do want the artillery to keep pounding. You can see this volley going into the Damsel of Light, just doing immense amounts of damage. Already knocked her down by about 20% HP and about half her morale. Unfortunately, once again, that auto fire going in, and the peasant mob takes a volley from the thunderers, which is a big waste of ammo. But I'm turning around to kind of engage on these units over there. I'm using flamers on the peasant mob. This is a bit of a waste in some ways, but at the same time I'm hoping to just break them off, force them away so that they're not tying my troops down once the actual fight kind of with the Dwarf Warriors kind of breaks down. Unfortunately, my Trollhammers were all set onto auto fire, and that is I'm definitely paying for that here, wasting a few volleys. But shortly I do turn off their auto fire, and that will help conserve ammo a little bit. Unfortunately, Dwellers Below does go here. I was on top of moving my Thunders out of the way, but not quite quickly enough, and Dwarves were very slow to move, so they weren't quite capable to get out clear of the impact zone, and I didn't move these Dwarf Warriors out of the way, so they took a lot of hurt. You can see they lost about half their HP, and several models. So definitely a very painful hit. And weirdly enough, you can see some units died like all the way out here, which really doesn't make sense given that the area of effect was here. But unfortunately, I guess that is because this is a direct damage spell, so simply if a unit is affected, all units are affected. Men-at-arms and shields going into the Dwarf Warriors, but now my Dwarf Warriors' great weapons are pushing in. And my opponent, seeing these flamethrowers absolutely devastating his right flank over here, melting through these men-at-arms, melting through the peasant mobs, and just kind of forcing them to break. My opponent is kind of getting desperate and sending his paladin into these iron drakes, kind of rear charging him here, throwing him around. Let's kill off 1 model. But this paladin is going to pay for his mistake, for the error of his ways there. You can see the Trollhammers are coming in. They are doing some friendly fire from my Dwarf Warriors, but that's an acceptable loss there, and you can see this paladin taking a huge amount of support. My opponent is focusing on shutting down these Thunderers, so the paladin and Lewin are over here fighting it out with these Thunderers. I'm pushing my Dwarf Lord over there and my Miners in to kind of encircle these guys, and now the Dragonback Slayers are also making their move. You can see though the Trollhammer Torpedoes are just annihilating this paladin. He's gone. He's been completely deleted. He wavered and he never recovered. The cannon over here is just zoning away the Damsel of Life. If I had been shooting at her from the beginning, I would have probably been able to avoid the Dwellers Below, and unfortunately that was definitely a bit of a mistake on my part. My opponent is only now pushing his foot squires into the fray, which is definitely a bit of a mistake, and they are moving at a walking pace, which is good for me. Over here though, I'm focusing down the Paladin, and you can see the Trollhammers are just annihilating this poor guy. These guys are just getting destroyed, and they're not even able to... not only are they not able to take off, the Damsel over there shatters and then gets killed. You can see the get shot off her unicorn there, and now Lewin is taking Trollhammer fire, and it's just doing amazing amounts of work. When these guys don't get shut down, they are simply monstrous. There's still a handful of Thunderers, about half the squad is still left, and so they're still firing. Unfortunately, the Lord does get terrified. He is prone to terror, and that is definitely a bit of a problem with this army. It's very susceptible to terror bombs as far as dwarves are concerned. And while that is, it doesn't entirely matter against Bretonia, which doesn't have too much terror, it does mean that, for example, Lewin over here is doing fairly well against them. My opponent does take off, though, and get Lewin out of dodge. And I do kind of try to harass him with the Trollhammer or the handgunners, and shortly thereafter I'm going to order the cannons to open fire on him, just trying to kind of whittle him down. Over here you can see a fire ring going down, trying to just burn through a few of these foot squires. But my opponent's front line, kind of absorbing troops, have basically broken for most part at this point. Over here, miners and dwarf warriors still holding it out, and you can see even though they're not doing the dwarf warriors obviously aren't doing all that well against the foot squires, so neither are the miners. They are tying him down, and that is all that I'm really asking for with them. And over here you can see the Iron Drakes just opening up on these foot squires who are surrounding this runesmith. They do immense amounts of damage, even to these armored units. And because it's just the runesmith there, they're not really doing much in the way of friendly fire. You can also see these Trollhammer Torpedoes. Trollhammer Torpedoes are not meant to deal with infantry, but against heavily armored infantry, they'll actually do pretty okay because they will one-shot them, which means they're pretty cost efficient as far as their ammo consumption goes. Over here, Lewin is kind of getting zoned away by the cannon and the thunderers, and now he's making a bit of a do-or-die last-ditch effort, kind of diving into these thunderers, and he does kill a few of them. But it's really not enough, and now he's just being focused down by these Trollhammer Torpedoes, getting absolutely annihilated. He's down to 200 HP routing, and now my opponent's army is absolutely breaking and shattering. The runesmith over here chasing away those guys, and the Grail really trying to tie down the Iron Drakes, but that's really just too late. So definitely a bit of a fun game, definitely interesting to try out the Iron Drakes Trollhammers. I definitely think the Iron Drakes Trollhammer Torpedoes are very good if you are capable of defending them. I think the miners definitely helped me make the biggest possible kind of zoning force, well, by giving me a fairly cheap armor-piercing option. The cannon definitely did a good job, I think, of forcing my opponent to attack me or to come to me. The accuracy buff definitely helped it as far as taking down that damsel in relatively good time. I definitely made a bit of a mistake allowing my thunderers to get caught out. They didn't get any kills, but that's okay. They were mostly focused on shooting at the lords throughout most of that game. But I definitely made a mistake letting caught in that Dwellers Below. Otherwise, my units performed pretty much as expected. The Dwarf Warriors, it's important to keep in mind that a lot of these skills were on peasant mobs or men-at-arms with shields, who are just pitiful when compared to Dwarf Warriors. Iron Drakes definitely solid kill count. Most of their kills would have been either they did annihilate all three of the enemy melee lords, and they also wiped out quite a few foot squires with those Trollhammer Torpedoes. It's a very powerful unit. These guys even gained a chevron, so definitely don't underestimate them. Trollhammers are very, very strong, but if you can keep them protected, make sure they don't all get shut down at once, they can just annihilate enemy lords, or enemy large units in general, and even do well against armored infantry. So definitely watch out for them. They're a pretty fun unit to use. As usual, I do hope you guys, and for my opponent, going over the foot squires, definitely performed. Some of them performed pretty well. They definitely tore through Dwarf Warriors. They're a better unit than Dwarf Warriors. And some of the men-at-arms actually did okay too. You can see 47 kills here, 45 kills. That's not bad when you consider they were fighting Dwarf Warriors and even miners. While miners have pretty pitiful stats, they're not a terrible unit as far as just their high armor. They have high armor. They have fairly high leadership. They're not a terrible unit per se. So it was definitely impressive that these guys dished out quite that much hurt. So yeah, pretty impressive. As usual, I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any ideas on what I can do better, or any comps or units you'd like to see demonstrated, be sure to post those down in the comments. And I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, I appreciate you all for watching, and bye for now.